I've managed to get down in and do some editing. I'm falling in love with editing this book because the pieces are just coming together so beautifully with all the different moving pieces happening in this novel. It's always nice when you get to the end of editing a chapter and you're like, I love it more than when I started. Like, this is amazing.
Is the best. You know what's even better? This critique group when you actually read their pages and it has improved so much, and you're just like, what is this magic? Like, what is happening right now? But then you don't see the tears and the frustration behind the scenes when they have to write those scenes over again.
And the 5 different edits that they did before it got to that point.
Also, by the time this episode's come out, I will either have continued my new work in progress or I would have started with something different because my beta group says it sucks. We'll see.
Oh, no. Well, you have to try new things to find out how it works for you. That's just how it goes, I guess.
So I'm both excited and terrified at the same time for our meetup.
It'll be okay. Well, today I'm just drinking some nice fruit punch juice because I can't. No, wait. No, I didn't. I chose a different one. Let me taste it. So today I'm drinking just watermelon juice.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Before my birthday party, got like sick like it's no one's business. And so I'm kind of in the recovering process. And so I have my
Mhm.
lovely mixture of, my onion concoction that I'm drinking.
How did I know you were going to say that?
Yum. Okay. Okay. Are we ready for this episode?
We're ready.
Yeah, let's go. Hello and welcome to Teen Tales. We are so happy to have you here with us. I'm Madeline Einel.
And I'm Sarah Sampson. We especially want to thank Sandra Margolis and Shannon Hancock for joining us each week. This week, we are having an author who is also a board game creator. He is also, if that wasn't enough, a collaborative writer. So please welcome Kevin Rodgers as we discuss collaborating with partners.
Hello, Kevin. Welcome to Tea and Tales. We are super excited to have you here with us because you are doing so many amazing things that I don't even know which element of your career I want to hit on. Because not only are you an author, but you also create board games and you have your own publishing company. So I don't even know where to start asking you to talk about your life or your journey or anything like that. But tell us a little bit more about yourself and your author career.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be here and speaking with you ladies. I'm a single dad. I live in Plainfield, Illinois, which is about an hour outside of Chicago with my kids. I was always involved in a creative group of people in high school way back then before they had, like cameras everywhere. We used to film our book reports instead of writing them out. We would do skits and we would do, different kind of adaptations and parodies of the books and stuff like that. So we had a lot of fun with that. And it was just kind of something that we were always kind of creative and like to do creative things. And then real life happened, I got married, had kids, job stuff. And that kind of took a back seat for a long time. And then about 12 years ago, maybe I wasn't really very creative at all. I had hit like a wall. And anything I came up with was little, hey, this would be an interesting idea. And then it would go in a notebook and I would never even think about it again. And it felt like I was pushing against a wall that I couldn't get through. And then my friend, Chris, designed a board game called Roll For It, which is just a super simple, fun game. And I didn't know that people actually did that. I just thought that, companies just put out board games. I never really even gave that a thought. And he kind of opened my eyes to an entire community and to an entire universe that I never knew existed. So it was like, instead of pushing against the wall, there was a secret passage right here that now opened. And I was able to go through. And that just helped release a lot of creative juices for me because it was a different outlet for me to try and reconnect on some of that creativity. And, we started tooling around, designing board games and having fun with that. Nothing that we ever thought was get published, but just like little things that were like, oh, this is fun to do. And then I started having different ideas for books and they were a little bit more fleshed out. It wasn't just, oh, that's like a nice little tagline. It was like, this is actually kind of like a possible idea. And then it just kind of kept going and going and going. A few years ago, 2019, 2020, I had this idea for these book series, and I reached out to another friend of mine, Rachel, who is a writer. And I said, what do you think of this? And she's like, this could be something. I'm like, well, do you want to work on it together? And she's like, yeah. And we started writing the Mason Gideon series, and the rest is history. Mason Gideon is King Arthur's son, who was born a few months after King Arthur dies. And in order to protect him from Camelot's enemies, Merlin sends him forward in time to the contemporary time. He's growing up now, and he discovers when he's 13 that he can do magic, that he can that he has to go on a quest to find Excalibur because he's King Arthur's long lost son. And along the way, he meets up with descendants of the original Knights of the Round Table, interacts with different Arthurian villains and legends. And, it's just a fun, good adventure.
I love how you flipped that. To be able to see that new idea just come into its own, where we're following now this son of a big, well-known figure. But the novels, they feel very grounded. How do you balance the realism with imagination in the storytelling?
Yeah, so really for me, I think the realism is what drives the imagination. If you can have something that's fantastical, but the foundation is something that you or I or anyone reading the book understands and knows, it becomes a little bit more relatable. There's an old expression that like the best lies contain a hint of truth, but in this case, and for me, the most fantastical stories contain a hint of realism or possibility. I'm rereading the Da Vinci Code right now. And I know that it's probably a 0% chance that any of this is happening, but these are real paintings, real locations, real everything. And you're like, well, maybe there's a chance. So I like to put that kind of in the writing too. If there is just a little bit of something to be like, well, maybe. That's why I like them interacting with real places. And, it gives it a sense of possibility.
I am not a very big history person or a person who enjoys reading history. So when I read the novel, I enjoyed it because not only was it set in modern times, but I was able to learn about these historical figures without having to learn history in a very boring way. So that was actually quite fun for me to be able to learn that and learn a new story and learn about Mason. So as you were writing this story, did you find like any plot lines or character arcs that changed significantly during your writing process?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the reason why I said to kind of go back a step, the reason we said in contemporary is because I knew I would get lost in the historical details. I would be crushed under the weight of trying to be historically accurate, even in a kind of fantastical story. So I would be like, well, what kind of armor would they be wearing at this time and stuff? And I'd be like, nope, I can't. It'd just be too much, I do like history, and I want to be kind of realistic and kind of make it so that it was something that, that has that kind of realism, like I was saying. But in terms of your question, there were some plot lines that have changed significantly. So when I first outlined the idea, before I even pitched it to Rachel, I had kind of a trilogy in mind. And looking back, I actually found those papers not too long ago. It wasn't super detailed, but I had the overarching story kind of outlined. Some things survived. There were some things where I'm like, oh, that's going to be in there, or oh, that's in there. And some things are like, oh no, that wouldn't have worked at all. And some things evolved and changed, and it all got better. For example, Mason's best friend, Reese, he wasn't in the original outline. He wasn't in the original idea I had for the book when I pitched it. That was something that my friend Rachel came up with, said, hey, he needs to have a best friend, someone to kind of go along with. And it just made the story so much better. It like opened everything up. And it was like, oh, this is fantastic. Mason's mother, Evelyn, had a much different fate than what's in the book now when I originally did it. And the bad guy in book 2 changed considerably. Really, what changed was, well, we were writing the first book. I had an idea to kind of expand the universe, to not just make it a series about Mason, but that he was one piece in a larger puzzle. So we ended up working on that and came up with a whole bunch of things. And that really changed the direction of how the stories was going to be told.
I love how you're talking about how she said this, and so we shifted that, and we kind of worked on this and came up with these shifts. Because in my experience working with my co-writer, there's times where you just need to be able to know how to communicate with each other to get through these sticky points or to do the world building and things. But that means picking the right person. right?
Mhm.
You can't just co-write with anybody. I
Right.
have learned that the hard way as well. So what drew you to working with Rachel Green, and how did that partnership shape and reshape as you went along?
So I've known Rachel for over 25 years. We met while working together at a haunted movie theater in St. Charles, Illinois. It was my first job out of college. I was managing it. She and her mom started for a summer job. And it was one of those moments, like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Step Brothers, where it was just boom, instant friends. Like we just clicked and we were really good friends for years and stuff. And she's a writer. She's put out 3 adult paranormal romance books and she's one of my best friends. So to me, it was the first person I thought of when I said, well, if I want to write a book, she knows more about it. She's a writer. She's skilled at it. I'm going in kind of blind. She's the perfect one, I think, to work with. So it was great that she said yes. I can honestly say that Mason would not exist without her. I may have written a story about what happened after King Arthur died, but it definitely wouldn't have been the same. And it certainly wouldn't have been as good. She provided a different way of looking at things, both in how to tell a story and why to tell the story. And that's part of the reason why I like collaborating so much. It's the back and forth. It's discovering new ideas. I get so much inspiration and energy when brainstorming with Rachel or with my board game partners. Those sessions they're rejuvenating and they just get me more enthusiastic about the products. And for us, working together is the most important thing. And this goes for with Rachel and this goes for with Chris and with Ken. Those are the people I work with on board games. The most important thing is best idea wins. If it's mine, if it's hers, if it's theirs, does it make the book or the game or whatever better? If it does, great, it's in. I mean, there were times we're editing book 3 right now, and I had a chapter I thought was great. Sent it off. I came back. There was a lot of red on that. And I'm like, no, I like that. And then I read it and I go, oh, you know what? That's probably a little bit better. Okay. And then I would read it again and I'd be like, what if we did this? It would change a little bit again. And then when I send it back, she's like, oh, no, that's great. And then we would keep going back and forth and tweaking little bits here and little bits there until it gets to something completely different than what it was originally.
It's so interesting for me to learn about collaborating because I studied theater, and in theater, you also have to collaborate with your fellow actors and your directors and your costume designers, and you throw around ideas, and then that ends up, helping the production and helping the partnership that you are doing. And so it's fascinating that both you and Sarah have collaborated with people. And I do sometimes think to myself, I'm like, oh, I should do that too. Like, I think because I've learned from just my beta reading groups that I've been in that just because some ideas come from other people doesn't mean that the story isn't still mine. And when you're collaborating with someone, like there are so many brilliant ideas that come off of each other and sparks things that is just so fascinating to me. You talk about like how much you love collaborating with people because it inspires you and it makes you like more creative and all those things. But what do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions people have about creative collaboration, especially in your writing?
I think you hit it right there on one of the last things you said was, just because somebody else has an idea doesn't mean it's not your story or that, you're going to get steamrolled or your ideas are going to be ignored. There's the suffering artist sitting at the typewriter pounding away at precious words and stuff. And some people work great like that. For me, not so much. I think as long as you pick the right people or the right person, like I said, it's the best idea that wins. So it's still your story. Just because somebody else comes up with an idea that breaks things open, it's not a bad thing, right? If you want to have it just be your thing and every idea and everything comes from you and you never do anything with it and you don't finish it, or maybe you just listen to somebody else and if they give you the little bit of a spark that sends you down a different path that you didn't even know existed, they lift up this branch and here's a whole nother path you can go in and you're like, my goodness, yes, that's great. Plus, we've all got our own lives and we have our own perspective on things. Working with other people, it's a perspective shift and you see things from different angles and it makes your story richer and deeper. I mean, I've known that from writing. I've known that from board games because we're very different people and we're similar and different. It just makes it better. And like for me, I wouldn't really want to do it by myself. Like I said, I just get so much joy from that collaboration, that brainstorming where you're going back and forth and the idea is just getting a little bit better each time, a little bit better. And then you're like, oh, and then this opens up and it's something else. And you get to share that with someone. I think the biggest misconception is that it won't be yours anymore. But that's not always a bad thing. I think humans are social people and I'm a bit of an introvert. So that's saying something, but we're social people. And the more connections we can make to each other, even small ones like beta groups or play testers for board games, they come back with great ideas. It doesn't mean it's not your game anymore. It just means that somebody saw something that maybe you didn't because you're a little too close to it. And that's not really a bad thing. Any connections you can make with people, the more joy you can get from this. This is writing and creating board games. This is a fun thing. You're supposed to be having fun. I don't want to be stuck on the same thing going, smashing my head against the wall because I can't figure it out when there might be someone right there who has an answer.
Some of the things that you have said have brought up two separate questions for me. You went into, you can collaborate with people who are beta readers or game testers. And to think of that sort of thing as a collaboration is one thing, but then there are different levels of collaboration, like actually writing together or actually building it together. At what point in the process would you say that the collaboration changes from someone who's giving you feedback to improve on yourself versus someone who is now a co-author or a co-builder of the game? I don't know what you guys call it in the gaming world.
Yeah. Designer. I've never had it get to that point. For me, it's been, okay, Rachel and I are going to go write this and we're going to go do this. Or Chris and I are going to design a game, or Chris, Ken and I are going to go design a game. We'll come up with the rough draft, the first draft, whatever, initial prototype, and ask people's opinions on it. When we sent out the first Mason, Elizabeth, who is a great fun character, wasn't in it as much. Like, her involvement kind of ended halfway through, and someone said, I really think she needs to kind of see it through to the end. And another one said, Reese needed something at the end. His character was missing a little something. Or, in the board games, they'll be like, do we need a rule to do this? Or can we do this? Or how do we move this? And those are things you just don't see because you're so close. Then you take that feedback and then we go off and we do it. I've never had someone come up to me and be like, we really like this. We wrote the next chapter or anything like that, because then I think you would start getting into that. And I think there has to be an agreement ahead of time that we're going to work together to make this book, board game, whatever. And, when you send stuff out, be like, hey, we're looking for feedback. And again, though, best idea wins, right? And I've never had someone give us such an idea that it facilitated even having that discussion.
Okay. I feel like being able to distinguish, like, you are a beta reader, please don't rewrite me, versus you are a collaborator and we are creating this together, is a very important thing to do, and to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So my second question that you brought up to me was, when I write with my co-writer, we're often working in the same document, in the same chapter at the same time. She's running some characters, I'm running some characters, and we're just playing off each other. But it sounded to me like you're writing blocks of chapters and then passing the chapters back and forth. Is that how you guys have found it works for you in your collaborative writing?
It really all depends. It started off with, I would write a chapter, send it off to her. She would edit it, send it back to me, start her chapter. I would go through, re-edit it. She would send me hers, and then we'd go back and forth. And it started out that way, and that worked great. But like I said, I'm a single dad. Her family is incredibly busy. So sometimes that doesn't work. And, sometimes one of us will have to write the next 2 or 3 chapters because, we want to keep moving forward. Sometimes, we'll have to stop until the other person can catch up and get the editing done. My kids are a little bit older than hers. I've got one that's 21 and one that's 17. So I don't have to chauffeur them anymore. They can kind of take care of themselves that way, which is great. So it gives me a little bit more time. Her kids are a little bit younger than that. They're still in the, thick of it in terms of parenting and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more of a challenge sometimes that way. We've worked together well enough where we can say to each other and be like, hey, I'm not going to get to this for at least 2 weeks. Do you want to take a crack at it? And then I'll work on it when I can get back to it. And, I'll say yes, she'll say yes. And then we'll just kind of pick up the slack for each other when we have to. We also understand that this is not our full-time job. This is job like 3 and 4 of ours. So, we understand that we don't have all the time in the world to get this done. So we work at our own pace. None of us will be like, oh, where's your chapter? We got deadlines to hit. No, we're not doing that.
I think that makes writing much more fun as well, because yes, when you do traditionally publish, there are due dates that you have to have your novel in, or you have to have your edits in and things like that. But to be able to then, since you are publishing your own novels, to be able to not have that strain of like a deadline or anything like that, I think keeps you enjoying what you are doing. But then, okay, so as I was reading your novel, okay, I was actually quite impressed at how the voice of the novel was the same throughout the novel. Because in my head, I'm like, two people are writing it. But then as I'm reading it, I'm like, but it sounds like one person. I can't even. How are you able to just like take that voice from two different people with two different like personalities and two different like ideas and just keep it equal throughout the entire novel? Like, that was just amazing.
Thank you. We actually had a conversation about that the other day because I was talking to someone at a book signing and they said they'd read it and they said, I was surprised, just like what you said. They said, I was surprised two people wrote this book because you couldn't tell. Normally it's like one chapter sounds a little different than the next chapter and vice versa. I was talking to Rachel about that and I said, I think what makes it work that way is because I'll turn in a chapter and like I said earlier, she will shred it and she will turn in act and I will shred it, not because we want to or because we're being mean, but because we see it and we want to edit it and we want to make it the best we can. So we put thoughts and stuff into it. And then when we get it back, she does it again and then I do it again. And then she does it again and I do it again. It's kind of like when you have two different color paints, you have like a red and a white and you mix them together enough and you get pink, right? They're still red, they're still white, but now it's something else. And I think that's kind of how our process works. It's also why we don't put out a book every, 2 months because we take the time to really make sure it's the best product we can possibly do.
That takes a whole lot of patience and a whole lot of understanding between you. Like, you really have to become friends to be able to continually go back and forth and to meld your styles together that well. So can you describe a moment in that process where doing this collaboratively absolutely made it stronger than if you had done it by yourself?
The number one rule besides best rule wins is, at least for me, I don't want to speak for her, but I pretty much think I can. There's nothing that I am going to ever write in my life, in this life or the next, that will be more important than our friendship. So those words aren't precious enough to where I would be willing to burn everything down to make sure they stayed in. We'll have discussions about it. I'll say, hey, I really think this is important because of XYZ. And she'll say, well, I think it doesn't work because of ABC. And that's happened a couple times. That's happened a few times where I've been like, well, I really think this works. And she's like, I really don't think it does work. And then we would come up, what that means to us is that there's an idea not yet discovered. And a few times it's happened, we've come up with something completely different and it made it better. So if it's not working for one and it's not working for us both, that just means we haven't found what we needed yet. I'll kind of echo what I said earlier to answer your question eventually. Sorry, I rambled a little bit. Just Reese on his own. Rachel's edition of Reese, it made the books a million times better. It made Mason more relatable. It made him more of a kid and less of this tragic Greek figure that I had in my head at the beginning, where it was like, I'm Achilles and I'm taking on the entire, Trojan army and stuff like that. It made it also back to that thing that we talked about earlier, relatable and realistic because kids have best friends. They have histories, they have games that they play together, they have inside jokes, they have all this other stuff. And if we can show that on a page, then someone reading it is going to be like, that reminds me of me and my friend. So that, without question, 100% made the book 1,000 times better. And I could probably list off several more than just that, but that's the one that first comes to mind when I think about that.
Okay. So then on the flip side, like, what has been one of the most challenging collaboration experiences that you've had and what did you learn from it?
So for me, the most challenging thing is each other's pace. I tend to work at an Alexander Hamilton. That's what she says. Those are her words, not mine. That I tend to work at an Alexander Hamilton type pace, where if I'm in the thing, I'll write 6 chapters over a weekend. But that's if I have free time. She doesn't always have that free time, so she works at a little bit of slower pace. I'm kind of, okay, I know what this chapter is going to be about, so let's write the chapter. Well, she'll be like, okay, what's this chapter about? What's going to happen here? 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 And then she'll break it down, and then she'll slowly write it, and then she'll edit it, and then she'll write it again, and then she'll edit it again. And so, like, meanwhile, I've done like 4 chapters. I'm like, that Kermit gif where it's, he's pounding on the key. That's me. And she's a little bit more deliberate about it. So sometimes that's a little bit tougher when it's like create, like, we're doing really, really good. Maybe we can finish this book. We can start thinking about it. Like we've got book 4, 5, 6, and 7, I think, outlined. And we have ideas for 9 through 16. And stuff like that. And some of it, like when I was traveling with my daughter's basketball team, I'm just sitting in the hotel. So I'm like, well, let's work on the outline. Where she's like, let me break it down. So sometimes we just go at different paces. So that's the biggest challenging collaboration challenge that we've had. But really, I mean, again, there's no deadlines. This is supposed to be a fun exercise. If we don't get to it, we don't get to it. I'll find other things to occupy my time. I've got board games that we're working on. I started writing the Mason screenplay just in case, just in case somebody ever comes knocking. Why not? Have it ready. That was one thing that I learned from the board games thing. We made a board game called Back to the Future Dice Through Time. And a year before we had the opportunity to make that game, Chris and I had sat down and said, what do we think would be really good if we ever wanted to make a Back to the Future board game? Because he's a huge Back to the Future fan, ginormous. And I love it, but I'm like this compared to the size of a Back to the Future fan he is. So we talked it out. We had a rough idea. And then when the idea came up, we were able to bring in Ken and put something together really fast and send it out. And we had it ready to go. So I figured, if I've got some time, I'll just work on the screenplay.
I think that is one of the dreams that authors have. Like, I want my book to be a game board. I want my book to be an RPG or a movie or a show, all those different things. And you have worked both collaboratively in both the novel and the game board arena. How does your storytelling approach differ when you're working with the game board creation versus the storytelling creation?
That's interesting because I have two design partners, Chris Leader, who introduced me to the world of board games, set this whole universe in front of me, and Ken Franklin, who we've worked on multiple projects with. We come at designing just a little bit differently. I'm very much story first. Surprise! Like, I'll have an idea and the story will be at the center of how I think the game will be played, whether it's rolling dice, whether it's matching cards, moving people around the board or whatever it is. The idea for the story for me usually comes first. Ken is the exact opposite. He's a mechanic first designer. He comes up with a mechanic and then builds the story around that. And Chris is able to use them both interchangeably depending on the idea. So the approach isn't really very different for me, but it's just different in the next steps once the original idea is there.
Okay, so like in how you're collaborating with the person.
Yeah. I've had a few of them where I may actually have to turn them into books because they didn't really work out as board games, but they started out as really strong stories. Because for me, the story just makes the entire experience of playing a board game a little bit more joyful. We have a game, Chris and I have a game called Mass Transit, and it's a simple card game where players have 4 cards and they have to play 2 of them to build either trains, buses, or ferry routes out of the city to stations to where the people can get home, whether it's suburbs or whatever. And that's it. There's no real story. It's pretty dry on that, but whenever I demo it or whenever I show people how the game's played, I always like to pretend that Godzilla's rampaging through the city and cut off all communication. So you have to build these routes out of the city as like an emergency thing. That's just a silly little thing I do. But I like to add that kind of story flavor because then people can, again, relate to it. They get a little bit more joy, a little bit more fun, lean in factor of, what's going to happen now when people are invested in the story, I think.
Well, speaking of your board games, so I know you said that, you focus on storytelling first, but what other kind of key elements do you focus on to make a board game both engaging and replayable? Because you do want people to kind of like play it over and over again and tell their friends and all those things.
We like to create moments that are going to have the players get excited and share an experience. Otherwise, it's just a puzzle, which is fine. Puzzles are fun. For myself, and my design partners, the thing we get excited about the most are the moments that cause people to lean in and as a group share an experience. For me, that happens when story meets mechanics. If the players are invested on what's going on, those moments happen more often. Having a fun mechanic infused with story just makes for just a joyful experience. Additionally, we love to play and create cooperative games. For me, it just makes both playing and creating the games more enjoyable. It goes back to that shared experience. My friend Chris also created a game called Train Maker, and those games, you roll dice and they have different faces, different parts of the train, and you try and put together the longest train possible to match different cards that have those things. And it's a competitive game. You want to get more cards than anybody else because they get different points and stuff. But it didn't matter because by the end, everybody was leaning in for that last roll to see if it matched, and that's what we want to create. Because if you can have that story, you can have that mechanic, and you have it blend well together, then the people playing the game are going to be able to have their own stories. They're going to be able to come. We've had people, we went to this board game convention called Gen Con in Indianapolis. It's like huge. It's one of the biggest events I've ever been to. And people will come up and be like, we had so much fun playing this game, that we had designed because this happened and nobody expected that to happen. And we have those moments when we play games and we want to pass those moments through with the games that we create.
That makes me wonder, will Mason Gideon ever have his own game?
I would love to do that. I've not had an idea for it. I guess mainly because I've been only thinking of, the different kind of stories and stuff, but I would never say no to that. Absolutely not. I would love it. Be great.
So overall to you, how important is collaboration to you as a creator, and how do you navigate the tension between maintaining your vision and incorporating all of the ideas?
So for me, collaboration is everything. I wouldn't want to do this by myself. Like I said earlier, having those moments that you can share with someone and building on those ideas, to me, that's the most important thing. I also find that it's better that when you have these like when we released that first book, it wasn't just me doing a little happy dance. It was me and one of my best friends doing a happy dance about it. Whenever we release games, my friends and I, we get together, Chris and Ken are some of my best friends. And when we get together and we play the game that we created, that just makes it so much more enjoyable and so much more of an experience. To contrast that, the lows when, you get the thing where nobody comes to your book event or nobody likes, or, you get a bad review on something. Um, you don't have to suffer through that yourself either. You get to share those highs and those lows with someone else. It's a long journey to go from an idea to a published book or a game. And I just think the journey's better when you get to do it with someone.
100%. 100%. And especially in this industry, because I think for writing, it can be such a lonely journey because you're sitting in front of your computer. You don't really have people around you. You don't have really someone to bounce your ideas off of. And when you can collaborate with people and you have writer communities and you have critique groups and collaborative partners, then that really is a different type of support system that you do have. So speaking of your novel, which also the third one is coming out this year, correct?
The third one, with a little luck, is going to come out this year. We are editing the heck out of it. It's been a really rough year for my partner, Rachel. She has had just the worst luck in the world since last August. And so it's slowed down the process quite a bit. We were hoping to have it ready to go by now. I mean, it's written. It's just we're going to edit it. We're still in the process of editing it. And then we're going to send it to the ARC readers and we're going to send it to, get their feedback and then send it to the editor and, have them do it. The little bit of luck, we'll have it end of the year. If not, it should probably be early next year, but it's on its way. So we're moving forward on it. It's just moving forward a little slower than either of us planned.
Okay. So this is kind of a two-parter. Not that it actually has anything to do with this episode, but I'm just intrigued. So first off, is what made you decide to open up your own publishing company and then just publish your own novels? And then second off, because I went onto your website and literally it's just your novels that is being published. So is your publishing company open to other authors or what's happening there?
Right. So originally we were picked up by a small independent publishing company. I had reached out to someone I had done some networking with. She's like, wait, I know someone who's an author and who does stuff. Let me put you in touch with her because I was starting out. I'd never written a book before, never, we were about to start querying. So I wanted to get some background information on stuff. We'd put the book out there to be queried and I went and spoke to this person and she's like, I worked with this publishing company for one of my books and I think they would really like this. Because I told her all about it. I told her about the plan for the different series and stuff like that. And we met with them. They were like, this sounds weird. They gave us a 10-year plan of what their plans were for the series. It was great because, our Mason's story is 3 books long. And then we have another new character who's going to be the main character for a couple books, another new character for a couple books, another one. And then they're all going to get together and they're going to have their own series. And we had that kind of planned out. And they loved it. And they had a 10-year plan. They were talking about all these different things, how they were going to, and I'm like, well, this is fantastic. So we had signed with them, but then right in the 11th hour, they ran out of money and kind of they released us from the contract. And I'm at this point, I'm like, I don't want to go back to the querying trenches. That sounds awful. But I had been doing some research throughout this process about publishing companies and what they do, because there were a couple of things that we were like, does that sound right? Like they were going through a different publishing company that was going to, it was going to end up, the paperback copy was going to be like $25. And I'm like, there's got to be a cheaper way to print that. So I had been doing some research and I went to Rachel and I'm like, do you really want to go through this? Or do we want to just, the book is done. It was at 98%. It was the last stages of editing and a book cover is all we needed. And that was another thing. We were disagreement pretty hard over the book cover. They were going to do like a Photoshop kind of piece it together thing. And I'm like, this is middle grade. We need something done by like an artist. So, she had said, we can go back to querying if you want. I'm like, let's just put it out there. So instead of just self-publishing, we talked about it and we're like, I personally don't know what I'm doing. I don't, know how to run a publishing company. We were going to use a certain font, but we could use it anytime we wanted for any personal uses. But if we were going to use it for business things, we needed to buy the license. Well, I didn't know that. So I'm like, well, let's create a company to kind of help us, shield us if we make a mistake because we don't know what we don't know. And I've learned lots since then. I think we're doing okay on things, but I sometimes feel like I'm in the middle of the Pacific Ocean trying, which way is land again? I mean, there's just so much. We're listening to your podcast and you guys are talking about writing groups. I'm like, what's a writing group? Like, well, now I need to research that. There's just so much stuff I didn't know. So we thought that was the best way to do that, kind of, give us a chance to put our stuff out there. And then to answer the second part of your question, we would love to put out other people's books. We would definitely be open to that as long as they understand that we are still learning. We're still growing as, writers and as business people and as publishers. If we can get someone's story out there who has a great story and a great book and just doesn't have the ability, querying is like winning the lottery. And then getting it published at one of the big companies is like winning the lottery a second time. So, there are a lot of stories out there that should be told. And if we can help in that way, we would love to. I don't know when I'll have time to do it, but I'll certainly give it my best shot. If someone will trust me with their work the way, we were going to trust somebody else, or the way we trust ours to the board game, when we give it to the publishers there, they're going to get my best. I promise that. But yeah, we decided to start it because we wanted to put it out there and we wanted to maybe start building something, and got to start somewhere. So that's what we did. We put our books out, and it would be great if we could come up with some other ones. But if we don't, then we've got a platform for our stuff, and that's okay too.
That sounds like a lot of fun and projection, thoughts, ideas floating around. I am very excited for you, and thank you so much for joining us today, for giving us your perspective and your experience and what you have been able to build.
Thank you so much for having me. I was so excited when we were able to connect, and I've enjoyed your podcast tremendously. And now to be part of it just makes me super happy.
And if you would like to learn more about Kevin and more about his books, you can go to his website at stolennightpublishing.com. You can find him on TikTok, Instagram, or Threads at Kevin L. Rogers 4, Blue Sky and X at KL Rogers 4, Facebook at Kevin Rodgers Author / Board Game Designer, and Goodreads at Kevin Rodgers. Definitely go on to those Goodreads and give his books a review. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thank you.
We like to keep things short here on Tea and Tales. Get your fingers back on the keyboard and your pens back on paper.
And if you like what we are doing here, if you love the guests that we have on and the topics that we are discussing, then go follow us on Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at Tea and Tales Podcast, and on Twitter /X and TikTok at Podcast Details. And go watch us on YouTube and see our lovely little faces. And then to help the algorithm and to help us to reach more people across the country, the world, the state, the everything, the ocean, the fishes in the sea, go to that purple icon on your device and go to Spotify and like and share and comment and tell us which board game is your favorite. Mine is Dead of Winter. Yeah, go check that out. And then you can go help us go up, up, up at some moment.
Join us next week when we will be discussing writers' retreats with authors and event organizers Jane Sanderson and Brian Veneer. Happy writing!
Bye!